The victims stopped appearing in mirrors before they disappeared completely. Security cameras showed them clearly, but every reflective surface in the city failed to show their image. Then, one by one, they vanished without a trace. What I discovered about the reflection killer would challenge everything I thought I knew about light, physics, and the fundamental nature of human existence. I'm Detective James Carter, and in 23 years of investigating missing persons cases, I've learned to look for logical explanations behind seemingly impossible disappearances. But the case of the reflection killer would force me to consider possibilities that existed beyond the boundaries of conventional science. The first call came from Sarah Mitchell on a Tuesday morning in November. She was standing in the restroom of her downtown office building, staring at a mirror that showed everything except her own reflection. "Detective Carter," she said when I arrived at her workplace, "I know this sounds insane, but I've lost my reflection." Sarah Mitchell was a marketing coordinator in her early 30s, the kind of organized, rational person who wouldn't normally report supernatural phenomena to the police. But she was clearly terrified. "Mitchell, show me what you mean." She led me to the women's restroom where she had first noticed the problem. I watched as she stood directly in front of the mirror, waving her hands and moving side to side. The mirror reflected the bathroom, the wall behind her, even the movement of air where she stood, but it showed no trace of Sarah herself. "When did you first notice this?" "This morning when I was getting ready for work. At first I thought something was wrong with my bathroom mirror, so I tried other mirrors in my apartment. Same thing, no reflection anywhere. I examined the mirror carefully, looking for technical explanations. The surface appeared normal, with no distortions or unusual coatings that might selectively block certain images." "Mitchell, has anyone else witnessed this phenomenon?" "My coworker Janet saw it happen. She was as shocked as I am." I called Janet Rodriguez into the restroom to verify Sarah's claim. Janet was a woman in her 40s who had worked with Sarah for 3 years. "Detective Carter, I've known Sarah since she started working here. She's always been completely normal. But this morning when she stood in front of this mirror, there was no reflection. I thought it was some kind of optical illusion until I tried standing in the same spot. My reflection appeared normally. I took photographs of Sarah standing in front of various mirrors throughout the building. In every case, the mirrors reflected everything around her but failed to show Sarah herself." "Mitchell, have you experienced any other unusual phenomena? Changes in how you appear in photographs, on video, anything else?" "Security cameras still show me normally. My phone camera works fine. It's only mirrors and reflective surfaces that don't show my image." I reviewed the building's security footage from that morning. The cameras clearly showed Sarah entering the building, walking through the lobby, and going about her normal routine. She appeared completely normal on video surveillance. But when the footage showed Sarah looking into mirrors or passing reflective windows, the mirrors consistently failed to show her image. "Mitchell, I need to ask about your recent activities. Have you been exposed to any unusual chemicals, medical procedures, or experimental treatments?" "Nothing out of the ordinary. I live a routine life: work, home, gym, social activities with friends." "Any recent changes in medication or health supplements?" "I started taking vitamin D supplements about 2 weeks ago, but nothing else." I documented Sarah's case with photographs and witness statements, but I had no scientific explanation for how someone could lose their reflection while remaining visible to cameras and other people. 3 days later, Sarah Mitchell disappeared completely. Her coworkers reported that she had come to work normally on Friday morning, attended meetings, and seemed fine throughout the day. But when security reviewed the footage from Friday afternoon, Sarah simply vanished from the video around 3:15 p.m. "Detective Carter," said the building security supervisor, "I've never seen anything like this. Sarah is walking down the hallway at 3:14, and then at 3:15 she's just gone. Not like she walked out of frame, she disappeared while the camera was recording." I reviewed the footage repeatedly. At 3 hours 14 minutes and 47 seconds, Sarah was visible walking toward the elevator. At 3 hours 14 minutes and 52 seconds she was gone, but the hallway remained the same, with no indication that anyone had left the area. Are there any blind spots in the surveillance coverage where Sarah could have hidden or exited the building? We've checked every camera angle and every possible exit route. There's no way Sarah could have left the building without being recorded. Sarah Mitchell had disappeared from a secured office building with comprehensive surveillance coverage, leaving no trace of how or where she had gone. A week later, I received a second call about someone who had lost their reflection. Marcus Reed, a 38-year-old architect, reported that mirrors had stopped showing his image. Like Sarah, he appeared normally on cameras and in photographs, but every reflective surface failed to show his reflection. Mr. Reed, when did you first notice the problem with your reflection? 4 days ago. I was getting ready for work and noticed that my bathroom mirror wasn't showing my image. I thought the mirror was broken until I realized it was reflecting everything else normally. Have you experienced any other unusual phenomena? Just the missing reflection. Everything else seems normal. Mr. Reed, did you know Sarah Mitchell? I don't think so. Should I? She had the same condition. No reflection in mirrors. She disappeared 6 days ago. Marcus's face went pale. You think I'm going to disappear too? I don't know what to think yet. But I want to keep you under observation to see if we can prevent whatever happened to Sarah. I arranged for Marcus to stay at a secure location with continuous surveillance while I investigated the connection between him and Sarah. I also began researching scientific explanations for how someone could lose their reflection. Dr. Angela Meyer was a physicist who specialized in optics and light behavior. She agreed to consult on the case, though she was skeptical about the reported phenomena. Detective Carter, what you're describing is physically impossible according to our understanding of how light and reflection work. But I have photographic evidence and multiple witnesses. Let me see the evidence. I showed Dr. Meyer the photographs and video footage of Sarah and Marcus failing to appear in mirrors while remaining visible to cameras. This is extraordinary, she said after examining the evidence. If this is authentic, it suggests that these individuals are somehow interacting with light in ways that violate basic physical laws. Dr. Meyer, could this be caused by some kind of medical condition or exposure to unusual substances? There's no known medical condition that would cause selective reflection failure. This would require the person's body to somehow absorb or redirect light in a way that prevents mirror reflection while still allowing camera detection. Is such a thing theoretically possible? Only if these individuals were exposed to some form of experimental technology that could alter their interaction with photons. But such technology doesn't exist in any laboratory I'm aware of. Dr. Meyer agreed to examine Marcus Reed directly to see if she could detect any unusual properties in his interaction with light. When Dr. Meyer tested Marcus with various optical instruments, she discovered something remarkable. Detective Mr. Reed's body is emitting a specific wavelength of light that interferes with traditional mirror reflection. His body appears to be generating some kind of photonic field that disrupts normal reflection patterns. What could cause that? Only exposure to highly experimental quantum optics technology. Someone would need access to cutting-edge research equipment to create this effect. Dr. Meyer, how long does this condition typically last? I have no data on that because this shouldn't be possible. But based on the photonic patterns I'm measuring, I would estimate the effect might become unstable within a few days. Unstable how? The person might begin to disappear completely as the photonic field expands to affect all forms of light interaction. Dr. Meyer's analysis suggested that both Sarah and Marcus had been exposed to experimental technology that altered their interaction with light. The loss of reflection was just the first stage of a process that would eventually make them invisible to all forms of detection. 2 days after Dr. Meyer's examination, Marcus Reed disappeared exactly as Sarah had. The security cameras recorded him one moment and showed empty space the next, with no explanation for where he had gone. I now had 2 people who had lost their reflections and then vanished completely. I needed to find the connection between them and identify who had access to the experimental technology that was causing these disappearances. My investigation led me to Dr. Patricia Voss, a quantum physicist who had been conducting research on light manipulation and optical invisibility. Her laboratory was located at the university's Advanced Physics Department. Dr. Voss, I'm investigating disappearances that appear to be connected to experimental optical technology. What kind of optical technology? Technology that can cause people to lose their reflections and eventually become invisible. Dr. Voss looked uncomfortable. Detective, that kind of technology is purely theoretical. Yet I have evidence of people experiencing exactly those effects. If such effects were occurring, they would represent a breakthrough in quantum optics that would revolutionize physics. Dr. Voss, have you been conducting any experiments involving human subjects in light manipulation? My research is limited to laboratory conditions using controlled light sources and optical equipment. But could your research potentially affect human subjects if they were exposed to the experimental apparatus? Dr. Voss was quiet for a long time. Detective, There are theoretical risks associated with quantum optics research that we don't fully understand. What kind of risks? Exposure to certain quantum light fields could potentially alter how biological tissue interacts with photons. But such exposure would be accidental and extremely dangerous. Dangerous how? The affected person could experience progressive invisibility as their body begins to exist partially outside normal spacetime coordinates. Dr. Voss, how many people have been exposed to your experimental apparatus? No one should have been exposed. My laboratory has strict safety protocols. But accidents could happen? Detective, I need to check my laboratory records to see if there have been any security breaches or unauthorized access to the equipment. Dr. Voss's laboratory contains sophisticated optical equipment designed to manipulate light at the quantum level. The machinery was capable of generating photonic fields that could theoretically alter how objects interacted with light. When Dr. Voss reviewed her security logs, she discovered that someone had been accessing her laboratory after hours and using the experimental equipment without authorization. Detective, someone has been breaking into my lab and operating the quantum light generator. They've been conducting unauthorized experiments for the past month. Who has access to your laboratory? Only myself and my research assistant, David Chin. But the security logs show the equipment being used when both David and I were out of the building. Could David be conducting unauthorized experiments? David doesn't have the expertise to operate the quantum light generator safely. If he's been using it without supervision, he could have caused the effects you're investigating. I immediately sought to locate David Chin, Dr. Voss's research assistant. What I found was that David had been conducting illegal experiments on unwilling subjects using Dr. Voss's equipment. David Chin lived in a converted warehouse where he had set up his own version of Dr. Voss's quantum optics laboratory. When I obtained a warrant to search the facility, I found evidence of at least a dozen people who had been subjected to experimental light manipulation procedures. David Chin, you're under arrest for kidnapping and conducting illegal human experiments. David was a man in his early 30s with the obsessive intensity of someone who had become consumed by his research. When confronted with evidence of his experiments, he didn't deny his activities. Detective, you don't understand the breakthrough I've achieved. I've discovered how to make people exist partially outside normal reality. You've been kidnapping people and subjecting them to dangerous experiments. I've been advancing human evolution. The subjects I've treated are no longer bound by the limitations of normal physical existence. Where are Sarah Mitchell and Marcus Reed? They've transcended normal spacetime coordinates. They exist in a quantum state that allows them to move between dimensions. David, people aren't missing persons cases. They're kidnapping victims who have been subjected to dangerous experiments. They volunteered to be part of something greater than ordinary human existence. David Chen's experiments had indeed caused Sarah Mitchell and Marcus Reed to lose their reflections and eventually disappear completely. But according to David, they hadn't died. They had been transformed into beings that existed partially outside normal reality. Detective, said Dr. Voss when she examined David's equipment, what he's accomplished is theoretically remarkable but practically horrifying. These people have been forced into a quantum state that makes them invisible and intangible to normal matter. Can the effect be reversed? I don't know. David has pushed quantum optics beyond anything that's been attempted before. The affected individuals might be trapped in this quantum state permanently. Are they still alive? They exist, but not in any way that we would recognize as normal life. They can perceive our reality but can't interact with it physically. The case of the reflection killer revealed that David Chin had been using advanced quantum physics to transform people into beings that existed between dimensions. His victims had lost their reflections as the first stage of a process that eventually made them completely invisible and intangible. David was charged with multiple counts of kidnapping, illegal human experimentation, and assault. His research was confiscated and studied by federal authorities to determine if the effects on his victims could be reversed. But the most disturbing aspect of the case was that the missing people, Sarah Mitchell, Marcus Reed, and at least 10 others who remained trapped in a quantum state that made them unable to return to normal existence. Detective Carter, Dr. Voss explained 6 months later, we've made progress in understanding David's process, but reversing it may not be possible. The affected individuals exist in a quantum superposition that defies our current understanding of physics. Are they suffering? We don't know. They exist in a state where normal concepts of consciousness and experience may not apply. The reflection killer case taught me that some crimes transcend traditional categories of law enforcement. David Chin had used cutting-edge science to commit acts that were simultaneously kidnapping, assault, and involuntary transformation into a completely different form of existence. But it also highlighted the dangers of unregulated scientific research conducted by individuals who prioritize discovery over human welfare. David's obsession with advancing quantum physics had led him to treat people as test subjects in experiments that fundamentally altered their existence. Every case tells a story, and the story of the reflection killer was about the responsibility that comes with scientific knowledge and the potential for brilliant minds to cause unimaginable harm when they operate without ethical constraints. Sarah Mitchell and the other victims remained trapped in their quantum state, invisible to mirrors, cameras, and all forms of normal detection. They had become living ghosts, existing between realities but unable to return to the world they had been stolen from. In the end, the most tragic aspect of the case was that David Chen's victims were neither fully alive nor completely dead. They were trapped in a form of existence that was beyond human understanding, unable to communicate with the world they had lost and unable to find peace in whatever reality they now inhabited. The reflection killer had been stopped, but his victims would remain forever changed, lost between worlds that science had forced them to straddle against their will.